The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Greetings. My name is Stuart Sutton, and I'm the Managing Director of the Dublin Core Metadata Initiative. And it's my great pleasure to introduce both the DCMI ACES joint webinar series and today's webinar presenters. The webinars in our joint series are presented as a service to members of the two organizations as well as to other guests. These joint webinars address our common goal of advancing the discourse and best practices of innovative metadata design, development, and deployment. The subject matter of the webinar series ranges from the theoretical to the practical. The topic of today's webinar is VocBench, a web application for collaborative development of multilingual thesauri. Today's presenters are Caterina Caracciolo and Armando Stellato. Caterina is an information specialist with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and is stationed in Rome. And Armando is a researcher at the University of Rome. Both have played very significant roles in the development and deployment of the open source VocBench application. You will all have an opportunity to ask questions at the close of the webinar by typing them into the question entry box. We do ask that you hold entering questions until near the close of the webinar. I will moderate the questions and the answers. Caterina will present first and Armando will follow. Caterina, you may start your presentation.
Thank you, Stuart. Good afternoon or good morning or good evening, whatever. I'm Caterina Caracciolo, so Stuart, very good guess, very good pronunciation of my surname. I'm information specialist at FAO, and I'm also the manager of AGROVOC, a multilingual thesaurus, which will be used today for the demonstration of VocBench. VocBench is an editor for multilingual thesauri, as I said, and when formalized as RDF SKOS dataset, is a web-based platform. And in terms of software project, is an open source project. So at the beginning, it was developed especially for the support and the maintenance of the AGROVOC thesaurus. Nowadays, is a collaboration between FAO and the University of Vergata. Armando is the lead of the software architectural group of VocBench. So what I'm going to give you today is a live demo of the functionalities of AGROVOC from a user point of view. But before going to the demo, I would like to briefly recap give you an overview of the main features. So at least for what is important for us. It's important that it fully supports multilinguality. And this means that there is no extra setup or configuration, whatever required for the user to enable input in several languages, so processing of several languages. Then it's also important that it supports collaborative editing. This is obviously important if you have editors, if you have many languages. So VocBench takes care of the concurrent use of access of to the data. It's important for big resources and big thesauri also that a workflow is formalized, which means that there are user roles. For example, there are editors and validators, and there are element statuses. This is important because within the tool you can do everything. So there is no need to have email back and forth saying, can you please take a look at this, and so on. And then there is an extensive support to the schema, for schema and data management. What does it mean? It means that editors and managers, like a project manager, can look at the schema, SKOS, concept scheme loaded the properties used, and there is a functionality support for Sparkle queries to export data and to load the data. And since the latest version that is going to appear soon, there is also support for mapping. So now I'm going into the presentation, the demo rather. This is the entry point for you. I'm going to log in. Okay, so first thing I will choose my role. I will enter as a publisher because the idea of this, what I would like to give you today is a feeling for what it means to run a project like a Thesaurus in a software like this. And then I will load AGROVOC, the latest data that we have. Now you can see that this version is version 2.3. This is unreleased and it's running on a development version, but it's going to be released soon, and it was too good to not to give you a a preview of what's of the latest development. So I'm now into VocBench as a publisher, and perhaps it's good to have spent a couple of words about what the publisher is in this mind frame. So let's think of it as a project manager, really from the content organizational point of view. And the assumption is that everything that concerns installation, data conversion, perhaps if you come from different formats, and server configuration and so on will be done by somebody else, will be done by a system administrator. So the publisher is somebody who knows about RDF, knows about SKOS, about Thesaurus maintenance, modeling, and that's the coordination of the content editing. And then typically there will be editors, either domain experts or language experts, say translators, who will actually do the actual maintenance, like edit of the content. I mean, I'm looking at AGROVOC. I have this interface. What should I do as a publisher? Probably the very first thing I want to do is to look at the scheme. Okay, in this module, okay, here in this bar, our jargon is that these blocks here, these are modules, and they give you access to different functionalities and different sets of operations that you can perform. So in scheme, you have the list of the concept schemes, SKOS concept schemes that are currently loaded. No surprised, I said we're going to work on AGROVOC, and this is AGROVOC. Then we have properties. So what happens here? What happens is that we are in RDF world. So we have vocabularies for RDF. Let's call them properties, in the sense like SKOS is a vocabulary for RDF, and the properties currently loaded, like present in my data set, so in my Thesaurus, are shown here and are organized according to this categories, let's say. So we have object properties, data type, annotation, and ontology properties. So we are familiar, but anyway, object properties are the properties that put in a relationship instances of two classes. So a classical example would be SKOS related. Then we have the data type properties that are those that they have as a value a string or a literal, and then the annotation I can show you actually. Okay, so here we have in the object properties, and you can see here, for example, semantic relation, and here you have SKOS related. If you click on any of them, the information that is available about the properties is shown. Now, in the specific case of AGROVOC, we have dedicated specific vocabulary, which is called agroontology. The properties of which are defined as sub-property of a SKOS related, and that's why they are shown in this way. So depending on the vocabulary, on the thesaurus and the vocabularies that you have in it, you will have different properties here. Data type properties, you are probably familiar already, SKOS notation, literal forms, and these ones are specific to AGROVOC. Annotation, and then ontology properties, so comments, you have notes here, and you have really general stuff that applies at the ontology level. Okay, so this is the, how can I say, the preparation, a really high-level view of my data set, but then I want to look into it. And then to do so, I go to the module concepts. What I have here is AGROVOC, so it's, in this case I have the top concepts of AGROVOC. It's a few, it's 25, and it's they have labels in various languages. So I can click on any of them, and what I have is the split of my window, of my screen, and to the right side I can look at the information available for the concept that has been clicked. Now I have here all languages all together, which makes the interface, like looking at the page, at the screen, perhaps not very convenient. Maybe it's not that necessary either. So what I do is I go to this red button and I select fewer languages for my convenience, and I choose English and I choose Spanish. So the number of labels that will be shown to me, it's now much reduced, much smaller. I have only the English and the Spanish, so I can adjust the interface much better. And but I'm a publisher, so actually I would also like to see the URIs of the concept. And actually I would like to have all possible detail about the content in the languages that I selected. So I asked VocBench to show me also the non-preferred terms. Okay, so I'm ready now to do a search. This is pretty standard, rather intuitive interface. I type here rice, just to have a, not just general. So I have a suggestion. This is the suggestion comes from the data, of course. This is the list of results. And let's say I can, for example, go here. I choose something general. I select this concept, and then what I'm going to do is to look in detail into this concept and perform some basic editing operation. So here now the hierarchy of AGROVOC is opened, has been let's say unfolded. And well, AGROVOC is a big resource. We have some 32,000 concepts. But that of course depends on what you have. So in case your data set is rather big, it may be convenient to do something like this and to look at the hierarchy. Here, this is a compact way of the tree that you have on this site. Then, of course, you have the terminological information. So you have the labels in the languages selected. And actually, it's not just the SKOS label, so label in terms of the terminology in RDF terminology. So it's not SKOS, but we actually have a SKOS Excel, which is the reason why I can click. I can do it again. I can click, for example, here, and I get some other tabs, so other more pieces of information. Okay. It might be relevant to have, you might have definitions, might be relevant to your data set, as well as having nodes or attributes. In the specific cases, there is no data to it. Now, I would like to point at the fact that now you really, I mean, this is the core module of VocBench. It's really the module that is used by editors, by people working on the content. So here also the terminology is closer to like a non-RDF geeks type of thing. So for example, you now have attribute and relationships instead of object properties or data type properties, etc. But we do have relationships here. These relationships, where they link together two pairs of concepts. You see them here grayed out because I always have this box checked, as it says show, inferred, and explicit. It means that there is a, it means that, for example, the relation is produced by, is inferred, because this is the inverse property that has product property. And this is also quite convenient for the data, from the data maintenance point of view. Then you have not all these tabs contain information that has been manually added. For example, I already shown you the hierarchy. This is a recap, VocBench computed for you. History as well. This is all historical information about the editing as VocBench does it, and so on. Now, this tab is the new news of the of this 2.3 release, and this is the tab where you can actually maintain, so create alignments, so links to other vocabularies, and this can be done. I can show it to you. It can actually be done in two ways. So the first way is browsing, like I look into an ontology, like into a vocabulary or thesaurus that it's loaded into this project. You remember I loaded the latest data of AGROVOC. I can, for example, load the previous one. This is just for an example. And here I can, where I was looking at paddy, rice, for example, oriza sativa, which is the scientific name of the rice species. Then I click. So the result of this operation is that I will have a, now it's searching through the whole data set. I will be able to make a statement, a SKOS statement about these two concepts, and this will then be maintained, and so on. Let's see. The other way for the other possible way for creating links, which is also supported by VocBench, is by directly putting into a indicating like a URL. So this could be related match. Okay, and this is what I have. I have a related match. I mentioned that before. The grayed out means that it is a mapping relation. The other way is I simply in the same box here I can type a URL. Let's say something like this, adding relationship, and then creating. Yeah, okay, of course this doesn't work. But for example, I could go do a search on Wikipedia or something and get the URL from there and put it here. I think I pretty much completed the overview of the core module of VocBench. Something else that is important for you to know is that you can always control, let's say, you can always know what's going on in the data by looking at the list of recent changes. So, well, these are actions that I performed before in other tests. And what I can do, typically I won't be a publisher. Sorry, this is okay. This is a term relationship delete. Okay, this is a brand new installation, so I only have this example. So validation. This I'm looking at the validation. So a publisher may or may not do personally this operation, but can always control what's going on, and the option is either accept or reject. Validate, and then this will actually get the operation will actually be like part of the approved data in the data set. What else? Okay, the very last thing I wanted to show you, sort of briefly, I would like to show you the Sparkle module, which is very useful for publishers. I switched to a different development version, but that's only for this demo because it's obviously usually in a it's always in the same installation. Here I copied a query, a very simple query that simply asked VocBench to get all pairs of concepts and corresponding English labels for SKOS related. Then I click, I launch this the query, and I get the results. So this is extremely convenient feature. At least this is what how I find it, because it really gives you like way more fine-grained possibilities for querying the data than the search. I didn't really mention, but there is also an advanced search, but as a that allows you to search for not only strings in the labels, but also relationships and attributes of concepts and terms in the various languages. But usually if you are a project manager, like if you want to keep like a close eye and close control of the data, that's a very convenient, very useful feature. Okay, I think I can conclude here the overview I wanted to give you on VocBench, and I can pass on to Armando.
Okay, I'm going. Hi all again. Yes. Thanks again for the introduction from me too, Stuart. I'm Armando Stellato. I am working at the University of Rome Tor Vergata as a researcher. And yes, I am part of the team that is working on the development of VocBench. And I'm leading the development of it and of its associated platform, Semantic Turkey, that is the RDF manager which is behind it. I will show you just a few slides which will introduce also some technological aspects behind VocBench. I don't know if you are mostly users or developers. I will try not to bore you too much, but the idea is that in any case, if you have developers that may want to contribute or are interested in developing extensions for it, this at least are pointers that you can bring back to them. Okay, just a few words about how it evolved, because it was born on the ashes of another platform, VocBench 1.0, that was actually also known as the AGROVOC workbench, because it was meant explicitly for the development of AGROVOC. We had the platform was based on the Google Web Toolkit, and he had used Lucene for indexes and for the indexing and retrieval of the concepts, and it was based on a Protégé API. MySQL was used for both management of the RDF backend, in that there were some RDF API that was provided by Protégé, but actually the backend for storage was a MySQL database. We had a few limitations that it was not actually working on real triple stores, because the Protégé API were mostly related to specific management of models handled through Protégé, and there was just an OWL interface on top of it. There were no possibility to import ontologies from outside. Actually, there was one entire dataset where there were put together all the conceptualization and the vocabulary that are being used. And there were no support for alignments. Also, it came with the fact that it was using a custom interface for RDF. There were no Sparkle endpoint, and the export was complicated because he had actually to transform the model into something standard. So the idea was to come together with a system that could obviously fill all the above gaps. And we had already in place a collaboration between my university and FAO, and the idea was to bring up a new system which was much more compatible with all the standards that were part of the semantic web and RDF world, and at the same time introduce obviously new features. So the idea was to also give a look at possibilities like extendability of the model, and also have an agnosticism, let's say, with respect to the RDF technologies to be used. We know that there are users that might like to adopt only open source triple stores, or other users that might prefer to rely on the triple store, which is very powerful and they already paid for, maybe for other needs, like publishing the information on the web. So actually they could reuse their technologies in their case. The idea also was to maintain, at least for the first version, the user interface very, very similar to the one that was already there. The point was that there were already some other customized versions of VocBench out there. So not only for AGROVOC, but for the maintenance of other Thesauri in FAO, or even other Thesauri around there. So the idea was, okay, let's keep the user acquainted with what they have, and let's just work on the background under the roof to change things in the way that we want. And then progressively add more features. So that was the road from 2.0 to the current version, which is will be released very soon, that is 2.3. So this is, let's say, a layering of VocBench. We have the possibility to change the triple star to be adopted, and then we have an abstraction layer on top of it, which is the OWLArt API, a set of RDF API which has been developed by my university. On top of this, there is Semantic Turkey. Semantic Turkey, we'll see more of this in the next slides. It's a system for RDF management. Actually, it's let's say an ontology server with high-level services for managing ontologies. And then on top of these servers, one can put different clients. So in this sense, VocBench is one of the possible clients of Semantic Turkey. Obviously, it's not just a lightweight client. VocBench adds much more to this because it has support for user collaboration, just to say one important feature of it. But the idea is that it is relying on the services which are offered by Semantic Turkey. So at the end of this, we have the GWT, or presentation layer. Any technologies could be used, and the one adopted by VocBench is the Google Web Toolkit. So this is the architecture. Again, I hope not to be too boring. This is just an explosion of what I said before. The idea is that we have an abstraction around RDF and the possibility to implement different connectors. The boxes that you see on this right column are actually the possible extensions of the layers which are offered by VocBench. At a certain point here in the architecture, there is this interface with the upper layer, which is the ontology manager offered by Semantic Turkey. Semantic Turkey then is built around a set of core services. These core services can be extended so to provide new functionalities to the system. This is particularly useful also just for main maintenance of the system, because as much as we add new functionalities, we can test them in separate modules and then add them when they are ready and when they are in a mature stage of development. Just to think about this way of thinking extensions, think also that the set of specific services which are being adopted by VocBench and which are not already in Semantic Turkey are an extension. So in this sense, VocBench is itself an extension of the, or is based on an extension of the core modules of the core components of Semantic Turkey. And then you have the client layer. This much depends on the technology that you are using. For instance, we had in the past an extension of Thunderbird, the mail client of the Mozilla suite. We have a Firefox extension for Firefox, which represents a very thin client for the Semantic Turkey server, and obviously there is VocBench. Okay, Caterina already introduced many of the features for which, okay, maybe you may be interested in VocBench. Let just me add something to what I already said. We have, from the point of view of collaboration and in general distributed access, you have a full editing history that is something separated also from the validation. From the validation, you can check all the recent changes, and validators might accept or reject them. But then there is a full history of the system. The full history is the thing that is still stored in the MySQL database. Then we have these RSS feeds. You might register to the platform and get information, progressive information about the changes which are being brought to the data. You have fine-grained metadata and editorial notes. One thing about many people asked me about why I chose the SKOS Excel standard and not just the plain SKOS. Well, by first it was, as to say, a requirement, because already in FIO they were using notes to be attached to the labels that were being edited. This could be some notes from the editors themselves, or just plain metadata, such as the date in which a given label was added, or if it was a modification of a previous one, or if it was deprecated or accepted. And that is, we could say that labels are first-class citizens as much as concepts are. So this really calls for the SKOS Excel extension. I recall, for those who don't know it, SKOS Excel is an extension of the SKOS format. It's a standard extension, and it stands for extended labels. So in practice, labels are not just literals, are not just labels, but they are URIs, they are resources in the Thesaurus, and then as such, they have obviously a literal form that is actually the lexical information that you're interested into, but you can attach to the URI representing the label many other information. Another typical exploitation of SKOS Excel is to add lexical relationships between the label, a thing that you could not really do if you were using SKOS. By those who are puzzled by the idea of publishing something which is still, in any case, has not the same diffusion of SKOS core, we offer a set of APIs, command line utilities, and very soon they will be added also to the interface of VocBench for producing a non-reified version of the information which is inside VocBench. So in any moment you can generate plain SKOS core labels starting from the SKOS Excel 1, or you can produce non-reified version of the definitions which are also reified into VocBench, and many other things. I mean, anything that is, the idea is that in VocBench we keep information to its noblest form. But in any moment you can flatten it out and get to more simple thesauri. The application, okay, obviously there is support for multilinguality, as Caterina showed you, and the application itself is also multilingual in that you may have interfaces. The user interface can appear in different languages, and at the moment we have those for English, Dutch, and Spanish. but more are coming. As an Italian, actually, I could contribute. Native RDF support, you have seen that we have an interface for Sparkle. Caterina just pasted a query, but you will see that you have interesting features such as syntax completion and highlight. And the very good thing is that the syntax completion is based on the same information which is inside VocBench. So, for instance, you might get the list of namespaces which are being used, and it can suggest you the prefixes to be added to the query. Yes, an important part is large-scale thesauri management. Now, VocBench has been taught with the idea that we are not managing a bunch of concepts, but we might have the need to manage very large repositories. So everything in VocBench is taught to be taught for scale out. Everything in interface is not meant to show a huge amount of information, but it can just show a few, and then you can search and increase the information that you're looking for. Extendability, I already spoke about this, and yes, there are, VocBench is probably the platform which has the highest support for multiple concept scheme management. The idea is that you can use all of the flexibility that SKOS allows for schemes, and at the same time we are introducing integrity constraint validation for checking when things may be broken by some improper use. Or a typical scenario is that you are loading a data from outside, maybe this data is not correct. So the idea is that you can run these checks and have them support you in repairing the data. And obviously, last but not the least, VocBench is completely free and open source. I will jump now to some slides more ahead. Yeah, this is again something about extendability, but I will skip this. And for those who are interested in developing services for VocBench, we have implemented a new interface which is very powerful. The idea is to reduce the amount of code very briefly without going into the details, but you see a portion of code in the upper part of the screen where you have to declare the services which are available, then you have to implement the service and make a lot maybe of checks, which are usually quite boring to write, and they may get your code error prone. The idea is that we developed a sort of framework behind VocBench for which you might benefit from the from the availability of specific annotations in Java which bring on the semantics of RDF. So the idea is that you can write a method in a very short way, like the 3 lines of code that you see at the bottom part of the screen, and then you have these Java annotations which bring in the semantics of VocBench and can carry on the checks for you. So in this case, for instance, the check is top concept here is made between a given concept and a certain scheme to check if that concept is the top concept of that scheme. As you may see here, there is this annotation telling that the SKOS concept that we might pass to the method actually has to be present inside the data. If it is not, you will get a specific exception. In the second case, as you may see, the second parameter is optional, and actually there is a default value, which is main scheme. This means that in any moment you can decide not to pass this value, and you will rely to this to the main scheme that is being chosen inside your specific project. Oh, sorry. So another thing which is which comes with the offer of VocBench is a very lightweight client module. I already introduced it before. Actually, it's a very easy way if you want to test something before you put it inside VocBench. Oh, I see that Cady Frey is among the audience. This is the Unified Astronomy Thesaurus, and it's Thesaurus exactly about astronomy that is being developed by the University of Harvard. And you might see it loaded inside of Firefox, because there is this very thin client for Semantic Turkey, which is an extension of Firefox, and it makes direct calls to the Semantic Turkey server. The advantage with respect to VocBench is obviously it doesn't need any complicated installation. You just drop the XPI on Firefox and you run it. Obviously, it has a lot of features less than VocBench in that it provides no user collaboration and not validation, no history of the action, and so on. It's, as I say, a very thin client, which, however, offers all of the features for modeling which are provided by VocBench. Look, I think we may go actually now to see a demo of Semantic Turkey. But before that, I will show you something around these resources. One moment, I need to change the screen. Yeah, by first, VocBench has an official site, which is here. This is the official site of VocBench, and from here you might get all the information about it. There is also a page on the 5 pages. Here it is. This is a page inside the AIMS Agricultural Information Management Standards at FAO, and this community actually deals in general with with what the name says, standards for information management in the agricultural domain. If you are interested in the overall thing, you may register on AIMS for everything, or you might just register on specific the topics that you are interested only on, like semantic web in general, or even in the specific about VocBench. In the VocBench page on AIMS, they describe all the information about the system in general, and also how it has been applied to the management of AGROVOC. This is instead a more general page about the system, and you may have obviously downloads, documentation. We are still working a bit on the documentation. We have a very good user manual which has been done by our FIO partners, and then we have some pages for telling how to install VocBench and to make a first quick test drive inside your machine. Or other than the VocBench site, you might be interested, depending if you are again a user or developer or maybe even just a system administrator, on the Semantic Turkey site. This describes the RDF framework which is behind VocBench. And again, you have in the documentation here, which describe both the RDF server, which is being used also by VocBench, and the thin Firefox client. You have also an advanced user manual. This manual is very useful in that it provides you information which are for system administrators and which are not evident by the interface. This is just by like working a bit behind the roof, under the roof, and configuring VocBench for things which might be tailored to your customization needs. As an example, when you many users asked us to put some possibility for customizing the way the URIs are written. So we provide this feature. Actually, it is now possible to completely rewrite in Java a dedicated module for building the way the URI, for establishing the way the URIs are written, or you might choose in a customizable in the default module, how to customize the shape of the URIs, like generating them from a serialized date time, or creating a UUID, or creating a truncated form of a UUID. So this is another possibility offered by the system. I will also let you give a look about, one other thing about Semantic Turkey. It's also, I will change window. Yes. It is also a sort of experimental field for new features that will be added to VocBench in the next future. For instance, there is this interesting integrity constraint validation module. This will be added in VocBench very soon. Probably not for the 2.3 because we are eager to release VocBench with the new alignment features and other smaller features that we are adding in these days. But this will be another large change that we are eager to add. That is a set of checks that can be done on a thesaurus. The idea is that many of these checks are not necessary if you build the thesaurus from scratch from inside VocBench. But a typical scenario is that you load a thesaurus inside VocBench, and then you have to deal with it. The typical scenario is that the thesaurus is written in SKOS, but not in SKOS Excel. Or the thesaurus has some errors, or the thesaurus is still loadable in RDF, but for instance, URIs contain spaces which are not very good for Sparkle, or maybe there is no scheme, and we enforce the use of schemes because they are best practice in the management of Thesauri. Or for instance, there are top concepts where there are concepts which are not top concepts of any scheme, or they are just dangling because there is no concept over there. So the idea is that all these concepts, all these checks may be launched on the system, and they will give a report. Here this thesaurus is well written, obviously, so all of them will provide an empty response. But for instance, I think that here if I check no label schemes, concept schemes that have no label, I run this and I see that, for instance, the scheme that we just added lacks of a SKOS preferred label. And in fact, if I go to the scheme and I open it, I don't see the label that is on top of it. So in this case, it prompts you with the things that are missing, and it allows you to add the new information. Another thing is an improved resource panel. You have seen in VocBench that there are many tabs, and actually some of them are actually overlapping. The point was, with respect to the SKOS standard, the point was that, again, we had an interface that was thought with the users in mind and at the very dawn of VocBench. And then what we had to do is to avoid too many changes and just things on top of the other. The big change that we'll make in the future is to revise everything in light of the SKOS standard and try to reorganize the tab in a better way. Also, we will try to make a more performant query system that will retrieve information more easily and quicker, and also we will be able to inspect information from outside. As you can see from, again, I need to switch the window. Just one moment. As you may see here from the alignment tab. Okay, let's try this one. I add now very shortly a new. Oh, let's put a real resource. okay, this is the resource. So for instance, if I know what to add, and I can directly add the resource, obviously this has nothing to do with the groups there, but it's just an example. So I put broad mesh, let's say, and I create it. At the moment, you might always inspect the resources which are being pointed, in that you might click there and you are redirected to the new resource. What they are doing here is that we are just pointing to the URI, and if that resource is on the web, that is, it is exposed through either HTTP dereferentiation or a Sparkle endpoint, you will get that information. And if it is, there is a content negotiation for HTML, you will see it on the screen that way. The idea is that in the future we will have an internal browser for this. So actually the resource will be checked for RDF, and if it is available, it will be shown from inside VocBench, so that you may see the data organized in the usual way, much the same way that you see a normal concept. This is just an example in Semantic Turkey. I really need to change the tab here. And as you may see here, there is, for instance, I may try to load the DBpedia information about Rome, or even the ZMICE that we saw before. This is still experimental, but as you may see, we get all the information about the maze inside the same interface which is being used for the application. We still need to make some optimization in the way that is being shown. But the idea, the same thing will be done in VocBench. So in the same user interface that you use to browse the internal concept, you'll be able also to see concepts which might be referenced from outside. The idea is to make possible to deal more in a more user-friendly way, even with concepts which come from outside. Currently, in the current alignment model, which will be published with the 2.3 version, you are able either to put directly the resource in the combo box, like I shown you before, or you are able to browse the local projects. But this requires for the data to be available inside VocBench. Usually what you will do is that if you need to make a big alignment effort between two resources, probably you will load the other resource inside VocBench, and then you will use the browse feature and the search feature. That will be very easy. But this requires the resource to be loaded inside. We might also want to improve the possibilities in the case that you are just a normal user who has requested no resource to be loaded inside VocBench, and you are getting information along the web for knowing which is the best thing to match. Or maybe you have maybe you are starting from the other side. Maybe you have a resource on the web and you're looking for the best way to map it inside VocBench. So the idea is, from inside the application, you may explore the web like a linked data browser. You see the resource, and then you, conversely, you explore VocBench, that is your loaded dictionary, to check which is the best representing mapping with respect to the one that you found on the web. So still more to go, but I hope that the alignment feature that we are adding already now is already providing a lot of information. Another thing, just to check how fast is this resource loading feature, check it in Semantic Turkey. Okay, this is the typical, yeah, okay, maybe DBpedia was responding, but actually it's very fast. And you see how huge this resource is. There are a lot of definitions, because this is the description of Rome in DBpedia, and there are really a lot of data, but they are all of them loaded very, very quickly inside Semantic Turkey, and thus it will be in VocBench. So I think that that's all. Maybe if you give me 2 minutes, I will show another feature that is coming, again, to give a look ahead. Just one moment, because I need to switch application. Okay. Okay, so I suppose now you see Firefox. Let me resize it. Sorry, I had to load another version to show this other feature which is under development. Okay, so load this, and okay. This is a system for a typical usage scenarios that many times happened to us. Is a scenario in which users ask us to load information from a data sheet that is usually an Excel file or some other format for showing spreadsheets. We developed a system inside Semantic Turkey that will be ported also to VocBench for loading information from an Excel file. So in this case, I will show you the Excel file. Where is it? So this is an Excel file describing a few information about data which has to be loaded inside to be transformed into a thesaurus. You see information about concepts, their relationships, like being narrower or their preferred labels, and if they are top concept or just under another concept. So then we move back to the sheet to RDF platform. This is the platform for transforming RDF data sheets into RDF. And we see here the Excel file represented inside the application. Then we have a very powerful language for transforming the information inside into RDF. The idea is that you don't need to learn all the information about the language, but actually most of the information can be inferred automatically based on the information which is found inside the Excel. So the idea is, the pattern is the famous convention over configuration. If the Excel file is at least understandable by the machine, he is able to write the conversion itself, and you don't need to do anything. So in this case, for example, the mappings between the data which is found in Excel and the results to be applied is written automatically by inferring it from the headers of the Excel files. But there may be more complex cases, or cases where you are not just converting triples one by just crossing each line with each header, but maybe you need to create more complex patterns. We are trying to put many of these patterns, like the pattern for creating SKOS Excel reified labels, inside the system, but still you might need to have a very customized case where you need to do something. That is the case in which you can work on this language that you write that you found on the right, and you might customize the information to produce new data. So the idea is that then you generate triples, and here you have a very long list of all the triples that have been generated, and you might inspect them. In any moment, you see that they are separated by, I don't know if you see it very well from the projection of the screen on your side, but here the rows are separated by light blue and white stripes. This means that each of these triples are related to a single entity. So each of the triples in the same color are related to the single entity. You might also see the relationship between the triples here and the line of the row of the Excel file where they come from. So when I click on the second color, you see that the indicator will move to the second row, and so on. And then you're able to, I'm not sure if this worked because it was a development version here, but when I make generate triples, yeah, maybe I need to configure something, but the idea is that this information then will be projected inside the scheme that you see on the left, and then they will be ready to use. This is already possible in the current version of Semantic Turkey. That is, the things that you create can be used to be ported inside VocBench. We already have a couple of users on the mailing list that used sheet RDF from Semantic Turkey and used the content to bring information inside VocBench from the Excel file that they had. The language is quite powerful. You have also the possibility, you don't need to write, for instance, these codes, which may seem like an artificial way of creating the things. Most of the cases you just get labels from the users. But the language offers you possibility to create URIs in a deterministic or randomic way, and to create them on the basis of the content of the labels. So actually you may get a very simple file from the users, and this still allows you to create a thesaurus inside Semantic Turkey and VocBench. So very last move on the site. VocBench offers you support in terms of mailing list. There is a discussion group where users can pose questions, ask questions, and hopefully being answered by us. And there is also a development discussion group for questions related to the development of extensions for VocBench, or in general even to its compilation or whatever it needs. So I leave you with, now it's time for the question and answering session, and I leave you with a slide related to the context that I gave you before. Just one moment, I need to switch back to it.
Well, I think I will begin since our time is getting short. We have about 12 minutes for some questions, and I already have one. The question is, how difficult would it be to import a terminology from the Apollon TDE to VocBench? I hope I pronounced that correctly.
From where? Sorry, the terminology from where?
From the Apollon, A-P-E-L-O-N, the Apollon TDE to VocBench.
Okay. Well, I never tried it, so I can't tell you. But obviously, we can make a test.
Okay. Okay.
No, because this is a very specific. I mean, I never tried to import it. I must say that the typical case is if the thing is. I mean, these things that you are saying are already in the SKOS format, or you are just talking in terms of information that is available there.
I don't know. From the question, I don't know.
Okay, okay. Yeah, the point is, in any case, if it is not in SKOS, then obviously you need a SKOS expert that knows how to model this information in the most appropriate way.
Right.
And then you may import it into VocBench. So there are two steps actually. The first is reaching the standards, and then checking if the things are ready for being managed inside VocBench. What I mean is, in terms of compatibility with the standards, VocBench is able to manage almost 100% of SKOS. It's still lacking the use of collections, but apart from that, it's completely able to manage SKOS and SKOS Excel. The fact is that, for instance, as I said before, we prefer to manage labels using the SKOS Excel extension because it allows us to provide more information about them. So the point is, some information needs to be lifted to some specific standards, like SKOS Excel instead of SKOS, or the definitions need to be reified, and we provide information for doing it. We provide, tools for doing it automatically. So in this sense, if the information that you have respect the standards, it will be immediate to bring them inside VocBench. The other part of the question, which is not strictly related to the tool, is given a certain terminology or thesaurus or whatever, how is it possible to bring it into SKOS? And my answer is SKOS is a very, on the certain side, it's quite shallow with respect to more complex formalism like OWL. But at the same time, I must say that it's probably a superset of the many formalisms that have been developed for Thesauri until now. That was obviously a requirement of SKOS when it has been developed. So, to my experience, all of the Thesauri that I ever had to lift to the SKOS format always never had anything which was more complex than the SKOS model allowed.
Another question.
Yeah.
Would it make sense, and if yes, how easy is it to manage OWL ontologies with VocBench?
To manage OWL ontologies. Well, VocBench obviously is from exactly the same, from how its name says, VocBench is a vocabulary in the sense actually of Thesauri and concept schemes management tool. We are looking forward to developments of OWL ontologies inside Semantic Turkey. Actually, Semantic Turkey already allows for that. It just lacks some services for the management of OWL complex expressions, like restrictions. But it is already possible to manage OWL ontologies in Semantic Turkey. This means that not only they are available in the Firefox interface, but it means also that the services are already there. And for the future, we might consider the collaborative development of OWL ontology inside the VocBench. The point is that OWL ontologies and vocabularies usually have a very different scenario. Thesauri usually have a very different scenarios. For Thesauri, with very large amount of data, collaboration inside a dedicated tool is a must. If we think about our ontologies, in my experience, I worked also in working groups for the definition of standard ontologies. People usually end up in writing them in text, and they might discuss over wikis or over Git repositories, because our ontologies are very small usually. So there is not really a big, huge need for collaborative management of our ontologies inside tools. But again, this is not a reason to completely avoid the features. Now we are focusing more toward providing more and more features for what EUROVOC is able to do. But yes, our management is on the roadmap.
Okay. Is there a difference? Is there any difference of features or capabilities between VocBench and Semantic Turkey?
Well, the main borderline between the two is okay. Semantic Turkey in terms of editing, in terms of possibilities in general, with what they are both able to do, will be always a bit ahead of VocBench, because as I said before, it is also our experimental field for prototyping new features. But in terms of collaboration, in terms of user management, this is something that is only present in VocBench and is totally absent from Semantic Turkey. Semantic Turkey, I mean, in terms of the, I suppose that when you make the question, you were talking about the Firefox interface for Semantic Turkey, right?
I don't know from the question.
I mean, Semantic Turkey is the RDF backend of VocBench, so it is part of it. and it is used both by the Firefox interface and by the VocBench. So in this sense, it's a component of both. If the question was about the user interface inside Firefox and the interface of VocBench, yes, the Firefox interface, as I said, it has functionalities for managing OWL, and it has features, some features which usually it's always one version ahead. It has features which are being developed, maybe tested, and then they will be brought to the next version of VocBench. On the other side, VocBench completely supports collaboration, where the Semantic Turkey Firefox interface is more thought like a desktop tool. It is for one single user only.
Okay. Has FAO developed any best practice documentation on the community development processes, the collaboration question, with collaborative editing and how that would work?
Well, part of it is reported in the user manual, but I can pass the word to Caterina. Maybe she can reply better than me for the FAO side.
Thank you. Yes, so in fact we have apart from the actual, like the user manual is something that relates to how to deal with buttons and menus stuff in VocBench. So doesn't deal with neither the content nor the organizational side of editing. On the content side, we have guidelines for editors. So guidelines that, so the main point is that for a single thesauri of small size, especially in classical scenarios, you have people trained in modeling, like people with a library background, for example. But now more and more you have domain specialists working on maintaining these sort of resources for one reason or the other. Maybe because they needed to maintain their own data sets, for example, or maybe it is so because the vocabulary, the thesaurus, or it's so large that can do without the specialization of expertise. And so these people will face the classical problems, or what should I do with this term? Is this a synonymy? Is this, what is this? Where should I put it? So for addressing this kind of questions are addressed in the guidelines, which are actually like public, although it's a document under evolution because we try to cover various domains and especially to explain the use of the agro-ontology vocabulary that I shown during my presentation. So the properties that are specific to this not only the SKOS properties, but really the ones specific to the domain. So in this sense, yes. And then we have something very slight, like suggestions, I guess, it might evolve over time about how, what are the expertise and what are the typical profiles of the roles involved into the workflow. So advice how who are the editors, who are the translators, what do you need to be a publisher, what do you need to be, what's advisable to be a validator. Well, the bottom line is that not all projects, I mean, all projects are different, and so you do not need to have editors, validators, in different people in all projects. And you might have one person, well, groups very differently organized, but yeah, we try to give our view on this. Did I answer your question?
Last question. We have time for... Yes, thank you very much. We have one last question in our available time. Can someone use Semantic Turkey in their browser to interact with a remote VocBench installation?
Absolutely, yes. Actually, not really directly VocBench, but when you have the three layers, you have VocBench that is querying Semantic Turkey services, and Semantic Turkey is the interface towards a data server. So the idea is that if you query a remote data server like an Aulim or a Sesame server in general, you might connect Semantic Turkey to that same server, and the data will be visible as well, and you are free to edit it. The only thing that you will be missing if you make changes directly from Semantic Turkey is that these changes will be not recorded inside the VocBench validation list and in the history list. But that's the only thing. If you need to make something that it's easier to do from Semantic Turkey, or you are doing changes before starting actually to work with a community on VocBench, you can do that from Semantic Turkey as well. We do it regularly, actually.
Thank you very much. Our time is basically up. There are still several questions remaining in the queue, and we will address those questions offline after the webinar. I want to thank our presenters, Caterina and Armando, very much for a very interesting webinar. And Stefan, do you have any announcements before we close?
Hi. The recording of the webinar and the PDFs of the slides will be available to the attendees within 48 hours of today's live broadcast. So please be on the lookout in your emails for a follow-up link to the recorded webinar and the PDFs. That is all.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, all of our guests.
Thanks to you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.